Welcome to the NICKY and thank you very much for subscribing and downloading our most unique and most powerful material till date, The Entrepreneur Advisor by Nicky Okoye. Entrepreneur Advisor is one of our series of exceptional, content-filled, empowering, and exhilarating podcasts, designed and produced for the 21st century entrepreneur and business executive wherever they may be on the globe. Dr. Nicky Okoye, our anchor, is a serial entrepreneur, experienced business executive, and a 30-year veteran of building businesses and funding projects. He has also advised heads of states, presidents, and heads of global conglomerates on 3 different continents of the world, including North America, Europe, and Africa. His efforts at leading a venture from startup conception stage to billion-dollar status in less than 18 months is legendary. The Entrepreneur Advisor podcast series provides our listeners with extensive insight into the latest 21st century strategies for business development, investment capital aggregation, and global market penetration. In addition, Nicky Okoye tackles the most pertinent issues while providing tactical insight as well as strategic solutions for building sustainable enterprises over the long term. Let's sit back and listen to Dr. Okoye. If you wish to engage Dr. Nicky directly, you can follow him at Nicky Okoye on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Again, that's NICKY OKOYE on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Hello, this is Nicky Okoye, and this is episode 6, Entrepreneur Advisor, and I am here again to share with you some of the strategies and ideas and sophisticated business models that I believe we can adopt for the 21st century to target and to penetrate specific markets. The last episode, we did talk about some of the game-changing industries that are driving the new models in business and the new disruptive business models which a lot of entrepreneurs are adopting in the 21st century. I did promise that we're going to talk about market penetration strategies in episode 6. And that is in order for you've decided on your market, you've gained your business direction, you've gained capital, you've secured capital, you've built your team, and now you want to position your company or your business for a market. And in order to do that, you must have what we call a market penetration strategies. A lot of businesses overlook this aspect of modeling. So folks come up with great ideas. They just take for granted the fact that the market is going to be there. They want to produce a product or they want to offer a service. They're like, I've set up shop and market's going to be there, whatever we do. But that's not always the case. And a lot of the reason entrepreneurs fail at the first, second, third attempts at business, a lot of the time has to do with the positioning for market penetration. And so what I want to do in episode 6 is to look at market penetration strategy as a part of the overall business model in order for us to position ourselves favorably in the 21st century and to gain market share. In the last episode, we did talk about the disruptions that are happening due to disease. So the coronavirus, for instance, is ravaging Wuhan in China. And as a matter of fact, some of the factories in and around that area have, suspended operations. They've closed down operations because China is trying to contain the virus to prevent it from spreading to other parts of China and, of course, other parts of the world. The virus has spread, but it's not as bad as the press is making it look. There's a lot of very smart people doing a lot of work trying to figure out how the world can dodge this bullet. But for businesses that depend on China and depend on that province of China for their supply chain products, many products in the world depend on component parts of that product coming from China. And in some cases, the entire product may be coming from China. And so a company like Apple produces quite a number of the components of iPhone in China, different factories across China. They do a lot in Taiwan as well, but they're not yet affected. So the Apple factories haven't yet been affected, or Rocks, which is one of their contract manufacturers, hasn't yet been affected. But there's a lot of other companies and other value chains, especially in the electronics industry, that have been affected. People are going to have to start thinking of strategies to address that. Unfortunately, one of the strategies would be to shift production out of China. And some companies are already considering that. The ideal places to go would be, to stay in the region, to move to Vietnam, Cambodia, and so on. But let's see what happens. I'm betting on China. I know the Chinese are resilient. They have demonstrated very clearly that they want to get to the top. They're very aggressive. And for the first time, the world has given the Chinese an opportunity to demonstrate their resilience and their innovation in the medical health technology industry. China has done exceedingly well in construction. I mean, we heard about the hospital they built in 10 days. Even before that, in 2011, they built a skyscraper, 57 floors, in 18 days. So China has pretty much locked down the construction industry as far as technology is concerned. So they're almost commoditizing the building of these large, skyscrapers. What they haven't done is they haven't demonstrated tremendous, expertise and innovation in medical health. And I think this virus is about to give them that opportunity. So my bet is that China is going to crack it and the world is going to be shocked. But let's talk about market penetration strategies. And I believe you can't do market penetration and you can't consider developing a market penetration strategy without looking at market segmentation. And market segmentation is a broad spectrum. So first of all, who are your customers? So in every business, whether it's a service or a product, we have three broad frameworks that we want to figure out. And this has to be done at the beginning of your business model, at the beginning of your go-to-market strategy. So are you selling to businesses? What we would call in the advisory world, we call that B2B. So is this a business-to-business sales model? Or are you selling to customers? So is this a business-to-customer, what we call B2C sales model? Or are you selling to government? So is this a B2G, so business to government sales model? So these are the three broad frameworks. If you're selling to businesses, there is a whole different market penetration strategy that you're going to have to design and adopt and go after. And sometimes selling to government sales cycles can take as long as 3 to 6 months, in some cases 1 to 2 years, depending on the size of the product or service that you are offering. If you're selling to governments and you're selling to businesses, sometimes the sales cycle in government can even be longer than the sales cycle in business. So sales cycles in government can go as long as a year, 2 years, even 3 years in some cases. If you're selling an aircraft, for instance, or a group of aircraft or military equipment, those are very long sales cycles. But in business to customers, those sales cycles are quite short. In some cases, the customer can make a decision off the curb right there and then. And in some cases, the customer can take 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 weeks. But in most cases, customers do not take more than 3 to 4 weeks. And if they do take more than that, then it becomes a high value item, which they're considering, like to buy a house or to buy a car or to buy, expensive home appliances or to buy jewelry. Those are high value items, which even though it's a B2C, so a business to customer model, the customer still takes a longer time to make up his mind or her mind. And if they have made up their mind, they still need a longer time to put the money together. And if they're going to finance it, they still need to put a deposit together. So sometimes the sales cycle for a B2C business model can be longer, but those lengths are typically affected by financing and in some cases budget constraints or budget timing, as the case may be. And so once we have decided on the framework, so B2B, B2G, and B2C, then we want to look at what are the demographics. Demographics can be very important, young, millennials, older folks, retired folks, people in their prime, middle-aged, men, women, boys, girls. Every business is broken into demographics in terms of the demographics of your customers. Now, another segmentation can be based on income. So in some cases, the demographics could be middle-aged men, for instance. But then you further segment middle-aged men into income levels. Are these $20,000 a year income earners, or are they $250,000 a year income earners? And that segmentation from an income perspective tells you clearly the kind of market or the kind of product you would be selling to that specific type of market. And not just the product, but it also tells you the way to sell to them, because every market segment in terms of demographics and in terms of income has a specific strategic approach which is best suited for that particular market. In terms of segmentation, you can also segment market based on the value system. So specific geographical areas, so geographical area can be a segmentation, but even within the geographical area, some markets tend to lend themselves to specific value systems. So what do the people of this particular geographical area, what do they value? There's some markets in Europe, for instance, that really, really love to read books, and that would obviously be a value system for the folks in that particular market space. In Africa, for instance, religion seems to be, the favorite pastime, if you will. And so there's a value system in Africa for religion. And if you had a market that was based on, or a product or service that was offered to the market that is based on religiosity, then that would be the market for you. And so the value system goes further. In the United States, for instance, we value sports. Different markets across the United States, everybody goes to the game, so it's either the basketball game, the hockey game, or the football game. And in the winter, everybody's all about the skiing and the other different winter sports. And so it's a huge value system on sports in that part of the world. And so value system has a lot to influence, if you will, the market penetration strategy. And sometimes the value system even affects government B2G, government buy-in. So governments are a reflection of their society. So if there is a peculiar kind of value system within a specific society, chances are that it will affect the buying pattern of that particular government, because government policy basically is designed and implemented to enhance the standards of living of the people of that society. So government policy is not developed in abstract terms. It is developed and implemented for a reason, and that is for the benefit of the people of that particular nation. And so the value systems would align, if you will. And sometimes the culture can be a market segmentation, can be based on culture. Specific types of culture lend themselves to specific types of behavioral systems and expectations. And so that pretty much gives us a broad framework and a deep understanding of market segmentation. Then we talk about market alignment. So if you want to now develop the strategy in detail, what is the market aligned to? And those folks who are responsible for developing market penetration strategy, you have quite a number of options to look at. I'm going to discuss some of them, but the most intricate and the most detailed market penetration strategies will be outside the scope of this podcast, because sometimes you have a better understanding of the products or the service that you're offering. So if I was going to advise you, I would like to know the peculiar circumstances, the peculiar product that you're dealing with, the peculiar service that you're dealing with, in order to advise you accordingly. But having said that, the market alignment is broken into a couple of parts. So first of all, we have what we call the local content strategy. Now, local content strategy is a strategy that allows you to align your product or service along the lines of the local industry. Now, this strategy can be used by a local company. In some cases, the government policy is such that it insists that you must buy local products or services first if you are in peculiar industries. And then if those local products and services do not meet certain standards, then you can look outside. Now, that tends to be government policy. And in extractive industries, you find that a lot. Extractive industries include industries in mining sector, oil and gas sector, and so on. Now, a local content strategy can also be adopted by an international company that is trying to penetrate a new country, and you can align yourself to the local players or the local business community in that area, support them to get governments to insist on a local content strategy formation and implementation, and then work with them as a partnership. So you get a first move advantage because you get to partner with a local firm, and then you will probably be given a 5 to 10 year window with which to build capacity of local companies. At the same time, you have penetrated the market. So in most cases, the government will give you allowance to sell your products or services for that 5 to 10 years while the local market is being developed. While the local market is being developed, you are the player in town, because most of the other international players are not using this local strategy. But after the 10 years, when the 10 years expires and there is local capacity in that country, you are still the main player, because these local companies will still have to work with you, either by virtue of the technology that you have developed or the innovative systems and processes you've developed over the years. They will continue to work with you. And so I think that it's a brilliant way to go. A lot of companies have used it in the oil and gas industry, and it continues to show that it's a brilliant market penetration strategy. The other market penetration strategies, again, we have to look at it from the local and the international perspective. And so on the local basis, you might want to say, okay, I'm trying to institute an export-led strategy. Now, how do I penetrate specific markets in the international community? Now, if you are adopting an export-led strategy, it depends on the product. Let's assume you're doing agricultural processed products. And I'll give a good example is cashew. Now, for instance, cashew is produced across the African continent, and a lot of cashew comes from Nigeria. Nigeria is actually the third largest producer of cashew. Cashew is a cash crop. I think we do about 600,000 tons of cashew. Anyway, so cashew is a good example because a lot of the processing for cashew is done in Vietnam. And so what the Vietnamese do is that they buy raw cashew in Nigeria or in different parts of West Africa. And then they take this cashew, they process it in Vietnam, and they sell it to markets in Europe and the United States. So a market penetration strategy for somebody setting up a cashew processing facility in Nigeria or in West Africa could easily be to go directly to the market. So, cut off the Vietnamese, go to the United States, find out who the end customers are. The ultimate end customers, of course, are the man and the woman on the street. But the large buyers are the departmental stores and the large chains, Walmarts, Walgreens, Sainsbury's, and so on. Now, what happens is that if you had a good processing facility, then you could penetrate the United States market by offering your product directly to these large buyers. Now, the good news is that these buyers would buy processed cashew if it meets specific standards. So the challenge would be for you to meet their standards. I wouldn't go and start looking for cashew processing equipment, and at the end of the day, they would tell me that those equipment cannot produce the kind of standards they need. I would go to them. I would go to Walmart. I would go to Walgreens. I would go to CVS. Any of these large, even Sainsbury's or Tesco's or what have you. And I would ask them to give me or to recommend the machines for processing cashew that they would be comfortable with. So those are the machines that I would use to do my processing, which means I will meet their standards from the beginning, which means I can penetrate that market. Now, this can be done on an individual level as an entrepreneur, or it can be done on the governmental level to aggregate a number of entrepreneurs to penetrate these large buyers and do these kind of discussions. And so that becomes a penetration strategy. Another penetration strategy is what I call the global supply chain. Now, the global supply chain refers to the different component parts of specific products that are produced by several manufacturers scattered all over the world. So something as simple as your shirt, or your dress that you wear. The buttons are produced by specific manufacturers. The color has a different manufacturer. The actual material is a different manufacturer. And so it all comes together. And the shirt is very basic. So I'm using that example because you have just about 3 or 4 components that make up any shirt. But very sophisticated products like a car will have thousands of different components that are coming from different manufacturers, or a computer that has hundreds of different products coming from different manufacturers. That all this constitutes a global supply chain. Now, for you to penetrate a market like this, it means you need to focus on one product or two on the supply chain that we can dominate. And I think that is a strategy that a nation can take advantage of. So it's not a kind of strategy that an individual entrepreneur will be able to achieve on his. And so that's the global supply chain. Now, another market penetration strategy is what I call the value chain intelligence. Now, the value chain intelligence is now looking at the entire value chain of a service sector or even a manufacturing sector. So beyond the global supply chain, beyond the supply chain, there is a value chain of different players, different participants that make up the value that produces the end result. So if you look at the cement industry, the value chain would include the folks who are mining the limestone, the folks who build the factory and manage the factory that is producing the cement, the folks who are distributing the cement, the folks who are selling the cement, the folks who are using the cement to build houses and large construction sites, and the folks who are regulating that whole industry. So that's the whole value chain. And there's an intelligence to a value chain in order for you to build a market penetration strategy. Now, if I was to build a market penetration strategy for that particular industry, I would look at the entire value chain and take a position at the most lucrative part of the chain. And every industry has its most lucrative part. Industries are broken into upstream, midstream, and downstream. So the downstream typically is where the tire hits the road. So that's the part of the industry that deals with the general public. The midstream are typically those who add the value. There's a value added role to be played, or there's a distribution role to be played, or there is a role to be played that enhances the operational value of the entire industry. And then the upstream is where the product is initiated, where the product is born, if you will, for lack of a better word. So in the oil industry, upstream is referred to those folks who actually do the drilling. They go deep inside and own the acreage. They own the oil acreage or the oil block or the oil field. They're regarded as upstream operators. And then the midstream operators are those who make it happen. So who provide services to these upstream operators. They have all kinds of services, from drilling the wells, to building the pipelines, to maintaining these pipelines, to selling the oil, and those are all midstream folks. And, maintaining equipment, fabricating equipment, managing fabrication yards, all midstream. Then downstream are the folks who sell the finished product. So a lot of the oil ends up in a refinery. So the refinery will also be considered midstream. And then that refinery sells the product to the gas station or the filling station. The filling station operators are considered downstream. And you have this segmentation in all industries. So in the entertainment industry, for instance, the upstream folks are the folks who actually produce the music, if we're looking at the music industry. And then the midstream folks are the folks who provide the equipment and all the paraphernalia that is required to get that music to the market. And then the downstream are the folks who take the music to market. So a market platform like Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, these are downstream players. So you can see that in the oil industry, the upstream players are where the whole value lies. That's the part where the folks make the most money. It's in upstream. The downstream folks, they make money, but they don't make as much money because the margins are very thin. But in the music industry, it's a complete opposite. The downstream folks are where the whole money is. So it is the guys who own the platforms, who aggregate the music, that is where the value is. The upstream folks in music, which is the actual musicians, the Beyoncés of this world, the Jay-Z's, the Davidos of this world, Flavor and so on, they are upstream players. And they make a lot of value, but that's not where the most value is. So they do have a lot of value because they are the ones they're the creative people, they bring out the music. But the most value in that industry is made by the downstream players, which are the platforms. So you have to look at it from that perspective so that you can understand every industry is different. And so if you're going to create a market penetration strategy for a particular industry, you want to be able to be sure whether you want to play in the midstream, the downstream, or the upstream. And in order to make that decision, you probably have to have analyzed the industry properly and know where is the most value in this particular industry. Every industry is different, So if you look at the food industry, agriculture industry, the restaurant industry, every industry is different. I could give you a chart, but for 20 industries and tell you which is midstream, which is upstream, which is downstream, which has the most value. And this plays out in every single industry. So I see that all the time. But I like to just tell you one more market penetration strategy is government partnerships. A lot of folks tend to sell their business model to the government adopts it, and then you can go to market with government as your partner. That happens a lot with foreign development institutions, so the FDIs, finance development institutions owned by foreign governments. They always support let's say developing nations with all kinds of grants and funding. But they do that by embedding either consultants or advisors or even companies that deliver the work that are coming from their country. And so if you're not coming from their country, then chances are that they will not give you the grant or they will not give you the funding. So that's a government partnership strategy. There are many other strategies in government partnerships, but I will stop here. We would go into more detail in episode 7. You can follow me at Nicky Okoye, that's NICKY on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all 9 yards, same name. And for this podcast, that's Nicky Okoye Podcasts with an S.com. I look forward to seeing you again, and hopefully we can crack the coronavirus very quickly and get business back on track. Thank you very much for listening. This is Dr. Nicky Okoye.